It's over 3,000 years since King David made his heroic conquest of Jerusalem and transformed it into one of the most popular cities in history. Although King David is long gone and Jews no longer practice monarchy, Jerusalem is still standing. Its walls and underground caves hold mysteries regarding the reign and death of ancient Israel's royal families. Recently, archaeologists struck gold when they visited the city of David, leading them to tick one mystery off their bucket list. They finally stumbled on an important relic of the Jewish monarchy that shines a light on one of the Jews' famous ancestors. What is this relic, and what does it prove or disprove about King David? What can we learn about his life, reign, and death? Join us as we answer these questions in today's video. We have heard of legends and read stories of great men who once walked the earth. However, only a few come close to or match the popularity of King David, the second ruler of ancient Israel. Although it's been thousands of years since his demise, it is hard to forget him because of his numerous exploits. The story of King David, if filmed as a Hollywood movie, would be a box office blockbuster because of its intrigues. His story is riddled with excitement and twists that would hold the attention of any audience. The legendary David was a shepherd boy who later became the sovereign of Israel. According to the biblical account, David was the eighth son of Jesse from Bethlehem. He entered into national limelight in Israel after he killed Goliath, the champion of the Philistines, a nearby rival nation. David would go on to become the king of Israel after the death of King Saul, who had been after his life. He went on to conquer the city of Jerusalem and made it the capital of Israel. David achieved several military successes during his reign, expanding the realms of his kingdom. He is arguably the most famous king in Israel's history and is often regarded as the perfect king. Furthermore, he is honored as the forefather of the Hebrew Messiah, Jesus Christ. He handed the kingdom over to his son Solomon just before dying at the age of 70. As with most historical figures, archaeologists have been fascinated by the prospect of discovering David's tomb. However, this discovery has been one hard nut to crack due to the period that David lived on earth. From what historians tell us, David reigned in the 9th century, so it is no surprise that archaeologists haven't found it easy to uncover the location of his tomb. Another hiccup in uncovering this ancient tomb is that many people doubt the genuineness of David's story. For centuries, skeptics have argued that King David is just a legend and didn't walk the face of the earth as biblical accounts would have us believe. However, this narrative has been punctured and is gradually fizzling out with the emergence of archaeological evidence that supports his existence. The historical text was not enough to convince the naysayers that the story of King David was real and not some tale the Jews cooked up to deceive the world. Hence, archaeologists had to come up with evidence that couldn't be refuted, and they needed to do this fast. Fortune finally smiled on archaeologists in August 1868 when they stumbled on an unusual find in the land of Moab, which is present-day Jordan. This famous discovery made the news in the scientific community because it was a discovery like no other. This peculiar find is known as the Mesha stele or Mesha stela. The discovery of the Mesha stele by Frederick Augustus Klein, an Anglican missionary, reignited conversations about the authenticity of King David's reign in the history books. Klein discovered the stele intact at the site of ancient Dibon, now known as Dibon, in Jordan. When it was given to archaeologists to examine, they found shocking information. The stele, which became known as Moab stone, is the first major epigraphic Canaanite inscription found in southern Levant. It is also the longest Iron Age inscription ever found in the region. Besides being a major piece of evidence for the Moabite language, the stone transports us back in time to the reign of King Mesha of Moab. Through the stele, we look into the life of the Moabite king and what transpired during his reign in the 9th century. What excited archaeologists about this find was the fact that they could draw parallels between the story of the stele and biblical accounts, specifically in the Bible's Book of Kings. This historical stone walks us through the political relationship between Moab and Israel, and we owe it all to King Mesha, who had the stele inscribed and constructed in the first place. From the inscription, we learn about King Mesha's military exploits. Moab had been subjected to Israel's reign and paid them tribute. However, under Mesha's rule, Moab rebelled against Israel. The revolt was a successful one. Afterward, Mesha began to make major military campaigns that transformed Moab into a regional power. The highlight of the story told by the stele is when it mentions the house of David, confirming the existence of a Davidic dynasty at the time that Mesha made the stele. The Israel that David had left behind had been divided into two states, northern Israel and Judah. Judah, whose capital was Jerusalem, was being ruled by the house of David, descendants of the Jewish king. According to Mesha's account, it was northern Israel that he revolted against. The excitement generated by the discovery of this Iron Age artifact had barely settled when archaeologists uncovered another spectacular find that attested to King David's reign. The The world was still reeling in admiration from the discovery of the Moabite stone when news broke that archaeologists had dug up another stele, known as the Tel Dan stele. The Tel Dan stele is unlike every other archaeological reference to the House of David. In fact, when scientists were probed, they confessed that it is the most significant extra-biblical reference that confirms the existence of the House of David. The fragmentary stone holds Canaanite inscriptions from the 9th century. We would have remained in the dark about the existence of this stele if not for the adventurous efforts of Hela Cook in 1993. Hela Cook was a member of an archaeological team led by Israeli archaeologist Avraham Byron when she stumbled upon pieces of this centuries-old artifact. When the pieces were joined, the result was an ancient stone wall, and archaeologists had a hard time decrypting the message written on it. It contained several lines of Aramaic, which was closely related to Biblical Hebrew and historically a common language among the Jews. The inscription was first read and translated by the renowned epigrapher Joseph Nave. According to archaeologists, the inscription gives an account of how an individual killed Joram of Israel, the son of Ahab and king of the house of David. These inscriptions corroborate the information that can be found in passages of the Hebrew Bible. Also, when archaeologists viewed this inscription from a biblical point of view, they concluded that the stele was likely written and made by Hazael, king of Aram Damascus. This explains the Aramaic language that was found on the ancient stone. Although the discovery of the stele was made in Tel Dan, the ancient stone currently occupies a coveted spot at the Israel Museum. From what archaeologists and historians have pieced together so far, Hazael was an important regional figure during the moment when the stele was made. The stele could pass as one of Hazael's praise singers because it boasts of the ruler's victory over the king of Israel and his ally, the king of the house of David. The Aramaic king attributes his victory over his two southern neighbors to the divine guidance of his god, Hadad. The stele paints a picture of how Hazael waged war against the kings of Israel and Judah, killing several thousands of their soldiers before personally finishing off both kings. It would interest you to know that the stele didn't explicitly state the names of the two kings. However, as soon as the story in the stele was decrypted, archaeologists began searching for a likely answer to the identity of the two kings. They have reason to believe that the kings in question are Joram of Israel and Ahaziah of Judah. Even though skeptics have a thing or two to say about this reference to David in the stele, it is hard to argue with the fact that the stone is strong evidence outside the Bible that indeed a King David lived on this earth several centuries ago. Skeptics can't ask us to ignore the fact that the stone mentioned a house of David in the Aramaic inscription. Therefore, it is a no-brainer that archaeologists nicknamed the ancient stone House of David. It is hard to look at this hard evidence and call it a ruse. After the Tel Dan stele and Mesha stele confirmed that King David was a genuine historical figure, archaeologists had a new dilemma on their hands, which was discovering the tomb of the ancient king. Although this new adventure was alluring for many archaeologists interested in Israel, they knew it wouldn't be an easy conquest. They needed no soothsayer to tell them they were embarking on a difficult expedition. The search for the tomb of King David is up there in the league of top adventures, the same as the search for the long-lost city of Atlantis. This difficulty was worsened by the fact that scholars haven't been able to reach a consensus on the nature and extent of his rule. Although biblical accounts give us a peek into the nature of his rule and that of his predecessor and successors, the information was not very helpful in determining the exact period his reign started or ended. Over the years, numerous hypotheses have emerged attempting to describe the nature and extent of King David's regime in ancient Israel, but none of them come close enough to giving us a near-accurate account of what transpired centuries ago. Consequently, the resting place of the Hebrew king eluded the investigative hands of archaeologists for a long time. However, this jinx was broken when a history-making archaeologist entered the scene. In 1913, from historical accounts, it had long been established that David had been buried in the city of David, which he had built as his capital. However, it was not only David who made this city his resting place, most of the kings after him had their remains buried in the city of David. So, if we were going to find the tomb of King David, our search had to begin in the city of David. This mindset helped Jewish archaeologist Raymond Will make his historic find in 1913. Will was a Jewish-French archaeologist who specialized in Egyptology. The soldier-turned-archaeologist had been interested in the history of ancient Egypt for many years before he came knocking on the doors of the city of David. Here's where the story gets interesting. No one knew about the site of the city of David in modern-day Israel until the arrival of Will. It was Will who discovered the famous site where David had set his capital and was the first to refer to it as the City of David. Will was among the early archaeologists who came running to Israel to make excavations in Wy Hillwood, Jerusalem. He had visited Jerusalem twice in the early 20th century to excavate the City of David. His investigative mission had received support from Jewish philanthropist Baron Rothschild. The Baron had purchased the area on the hill of the city of David, so he sent Will down to investigate if that was the site of King David's one-time capital. Although there is no record that Baron Rothschild stated clearly that he hoped that Will would discover David's tomb, it wouldn't be unlikely for the philanthropist to have hinted at the possibility, even if he didn't. Will surely had his mind fixed on this goal, and we would see this play out in the next 2 decades. Will was out on a mission to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. As much as the discovery of the city of David was a great feat, uncovering the tomb of the Israelite king could be considered a greater feat for thousands of years. The tomb lay hidden from the rest of the world, and now the universe was presenting Will with the opportunity to write a new chapter in the sands of time. The discovery of the ancient tomb of David by a Jewish archaeologist would be one for the history books. Moreover, Will's Jewish heritage came with another advantage, which was an understanding of the terrain. By leveraging biblical history, Will was able to map out a good plan on how to begin his archaeological investigation. Will arrived in the city of Jerusalem, which was still a part of the Ottoman Empire, on October 24, 1913. He displayed his seriousness in achieving his goal by first mapping out the city and carefully noting its most ancient site, the famous city of David, which rests on a 12-acre land area. 2 biblical verses served as Will's compass for this journey, helping him navigate this area. The first verse is 1 Kings 2 verse 10, which states, "Then David rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David." This verse was his confirmation that the tomb could only be found in the city of David. The second verse can be found in Nehemiah 3 verse 15, which describes the repairs made to the wall of the Pool of Siloam, extending from the king's garden to the steps leading down from the city of David. Armed with this information, Will knew where to begin his search. Will started his investigation by digging south of the hill, passing through an ancient pool that was later confirmed to be the Pool of Siloam. Midway through this journey, he stumbled upon a large quarry in the south of the city that had destroyed 2 rock-hewn caves. You can imagine the surprise on his face when he encountered this astonishing find. As soon as he spotted the caves, Will knew without a doubt that they were the burial place of kings from the time of King David. Will was standing right at the gates of a historic cemetery, one that was exclusive to the rulers of ancient Israel. Excitement and fear were the strongest feelings that captured his heart at that moment. He was excited because he had stumbled upon a discovery that would make the average archaeologist green with envy. On the other hand, he was scared because he didn't know what sleeping giant he might awaken if he went into the caves. Nevertheless, he took a step of faith, and that little act saw him surfing through the rough surfaces of the caves in search of the tombs of men the world had long forgotten about. Will hadn't gone far in his journey when he saw a Greek inscription. When he studied it, he discovered that the inscription was from the time of the Second Temple. The inscription documented the establishment of a synagogue by a priest named Theodotus. Without a doubt, Will knew that he couldn't complete this mission alone, so he decided to seek help, like any right-thinking archaeologist would. His first port of call was the neighboring village, where he contracted the services of 200 local men and 30 donkeys. The animals came in handy for transporting the huge pile of excavated earth outside the excavated site. As expected, Will documented what he had discovered. Will's investigation had led him to a group of large tombs cut in horizontal galleries that tally with the description given by Nehemiah. Another interesting find that Will encountered in this area was funeral deposits that were obviously from the Judean period. The highlight of this investigation was when Will stumbled upon the ancient walls of the city. He hadn't expected to come upon the discovery so soon. The disappointing part of this discovery was that the tombs were seriously damaged, but that was not a peculiar situation. It is common for such damage to occur in ancient archaeological sites like Jerusalem, which have undergone centuries of construction, destruction, and reconstruction. It would have been surprising if such damage didn't befall the tombs, considering the history of the city. As soon as news of Will's discovery spread to other parts of the world, historians and archaeologists came rushing to the site. It became a new pilgrimage spot for folks who were fascinated by ancient history, as everyone wanted to see for themselves if the tombs were real, like Will had claimed. You can imagine the lit-up faces of hundreds of tourists who visited the site to get a glimpse of the Davidic necropolis. Everyone wanted to connect with the legendary King David of Israel. This discovery added another layer to the blocks of evidence that confirmed King David's genuineness as a historical figure and helped douse the skepticism of critics. We owe all of this to the relentless efforts of Raymond Will in searching for the tomb when it would have been easier to give up, given the difficulties he encountered on the journey. Will could have pulled out from the mission, but he chose to press on. Will is the reason we can go back in time and see what transpired in ancient Israel. However, this story is far from over. Despite receiving commendations for his spectacular discovery, Will's account of the finding has generated criticisms from other archaeologists, historians, and scholars. They argue that there is not enough proof for us to stand behind Will's supposed discovery. This problem is heightened by the fact that another site is believed to be where David's tomb lies. Some archaeologists and historians are of the opinion that King David's actual resting place is in a compound on Mount Zion. Mount Zion is a hill located in Jerusalem, just outside the Old City, and it is believed to be the city of David. Hence, David's tomb is somewhere in the compound. The compound is located in what once was a ground-floor corner of Hagia Zion, one of the early churches in the city. But this claim has also been subject to skepticism, as there is little to no concrete evidence that Mount Zion was formerly the city of David. Moreover, most archaeologists, historians, and Jewish religious authorities do not see the site as the actual resting place of the legendary King David. Therefore, we are left with Will's 1913 discovery, and we have no choice but to stick with it until more convincing evidence emerges.